In the fall of 1970, a sitcom about a 30-year-old woman who wasn't married, wasn't looking to get married, and was perfectly happy about it walked onto CBS and rewrote the rules of the genre. The Mary Tyler Moore Show ran for 7 seasons, spawned 3 spin-offs, and left behind a stack of 29 Emmy Awards. But almost none of it was supposed to happen the way it did. The network nearly buried the pilot before it aired. The lead character was rewritten at the last minute, and more than one now iconic performance almost went to somebody else entirely. Here are 15 facts about the Mary Tyler Moore Show that even devoted fans of WJM-TV might not know. Before America ever met Mary Richards, CBS met a version of her that nobody liked. According to Robert Levine, Mary Tyler Moore's widower and an executive producer on the 2023 HBO documentary, Being Mary Tyler Moore, the network's first test screening of the pilot script did not go well at all. It did not test well, and the network executives came to them and said, "Fix it." Levine told Yahoo Entertainment ahead of the documentary's release. The test version had been shot under rough conditions, with creators James L. Brooks and Alan Burns still finding the show's voice. Rather than scrap the project, Brooks, Moore, and her husband and business partner Grant Tinker went back in for repairs. The fixes were surprisingly small, trimming a few lines, tightening the pacing, and critically, giving Phyllis's young daughter, Bess, a moment of open affection for Rhoda, which instantly made Rhoda more likable to test audiences. The producers also cut Moore's opening narration and let Sonny Curtis's new theme song, Love Is All Around, set the tone instead. Small changes, enormous consequences. Because CBS had committed to a full season order rather than a traditional pilot process, the show survived its own rocky start long enough to become one of television's most decorated series. The most famous behind-the-scenes story from the show's development is also one of the best documented. Mary Richards was never supposed to be single by choice. In the earliest version of the concept that Brooks and Burns pitched to the network, Mary was a divorcee starting over in Minneapolis. CBS balked immediately. Co-creator Alan Burns recounted, in an interview archived by the Television Academy, that network executives told them American audiences simply would not tolerate 4 things on their television screens: people from New York, divorced women, Jewish characters, and men with mustaches. Whether or not that list was ever formal network research, it was treated as gospel at the time, and the divorce storyline was scrapped. There was a second worry underneath it. Moore had spent 5 years as Laura Petrie, the cheerful young wife on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and CBS feared viewers would assume Laura had left her husband. So the writers reworked Mary's backstory. She had simply spent years supporting a boyfriend through medical school, and when he finished, he left her instead of proposing. The change, forced by network anxiety, arguably made the character more radical. A woman who had never been defined by a husband in the first place, who built her own apartment and her own career on her own terms, was a genuinely new figure for American sitcoms in 1970. It's hard to picture anyone but Ed Asner behind Lou Grant's desk, but he was far from a lock for the role. Casting director Ethel Wynant had seen Asner play a tough newspaperman in the drama Slattery's People and thought he had the right energy. But the producers also considered Jack Klugman, castmate Gavin MacLeod, and Second City veteran Shelley Berman before settling on Asner. According to Jennifer Cation Armstrong's history of the show, Mary and Lou and Rhoda and Ted, his first audition nearly ended the conversation before it started. Asner read the now legendary exchange. "You've got spunk. I hate spunk," with heavy dramatic weight, treating a sitcom scene like courtroom testimony, and the room's response was lukewarm at best. Rather than walking away, Asner pushed back and asked the producers to actually tell him what they wanted from the character instead of being polite about a bad read. They talked it through. He read again, and the second attempt won over everyone in the room except Moore herself, who reportedly needed convincing that he was the right fit. The producers told her flatly that he was her Lou Grant. They were right. Asner would go on to win 3 Emmys for the role on this show alone, plus 2 more playing the same character on the spin-off drama Lou Grant. Valerie Harper's Rhoda Morgenstern became so beloved that she carried her own spin-off for 5 seasons, but she was the last major role cast in the entire show, and the search took a while. Reports on the casting process described more than 50 actresses reading opposite Moore before Harper landed the part. What made producers hesitate wasn't her performance. It was that Rhoda had been conceived as a plain, self-deprecating counterpoint to Mary, and Harper was strikingly attractive. Director Jay Sandrich pushed for her anyway and suggested she read the callback with no makeup, which helped the producers see the character differently. Rhoda didn't need to look unattractive. She just needed to feel like someone who saw herself that way. There was still a rough patch after the character reached the screen. Test audiences responded poorly to Rhoda's sharp-elbowed New York humor in the reworked pilot, and the writers added a small but important fix, a line from Bess, Phyllis's daughter, expressing simple, uncomplicated affection for her. If a warm, guileless child like Rhoda, the audience could relax and like her too. And they did, eventually enough to give her a hit show of her own. Chuckles Bites the Dust. The 1975 episode in which a children's show clown is trampled by an elephant while dressed as Peter Peanut is routinely ranked among the greatest sitcom episodes ever made, and its origin is stranger than the plot itself. Writer David Lloyd later explained that the idea came from two separate places. The first was a real news item about a man who suffocated after getting a large, empty food can wedged over his head, and, according to Lloyd's own account, the man's co-workers reportedly could not stop laughing at his funeral. The second, more personal source was a childhood memory. Young David Lloyd once watched his own mother and aunt dissolve into an uncontrollable giggling fit during an actual funeral, mortifying him at the time. Lloyd fused the absurd death with the inappropriate laughter and built an episode in which the WJM newsroom cracks jokes about Chuckles' demise while Mary scolds them for their insensitivity, right up until the funeral itself, when she is the one who can't stop laughing. The script secured David Lloyd the Emmy for Outstanding Writing in a Comedy Series, and director Joan Darling picked up a nomination for Outstanding Directing, a notable achievement for one of the few women directing sitcoms at the time. Getting Chuckles Bites the Dust made wasn't just a writing challenge. It needed its stars' buy-in, and for a moment, she wasn't sure. Director Joan Darling later described a rehearsal a few days into production when Moore stopped everyone cold, questioning whether a sitcom should really be mining a funeral for laughs. It took some convincing from Darling, who argued that if Mary Richards worked through the discomfort of laughing at the wrong moment on screen, viewers who'd done the same thing in real life would feel less alone in it. Moore agreed to proceed, and the resulting performance, visibly struggling not to break character while trying to keep a straight face, became one of the most acclaimed pieces of physical comedy acting in the show's run, according to co-creator Alan Burns, who noted Moore had trouble keeping composure even in dress rehearsals. Sue and Nivens, the saccharine sweet, quietly ruthless host of WJM's cooking segment, The Happy Homemaker, is one of the most memorable characters to come out of the show, and she was written as a one-episode guest villain with no plans for a return engagement. The idea was simple. Bring in someone who was aggressively wholesome on camera and privately merciless off it. Let her spar with Mary for 22 minutes and send her home. Betty White's performance changed the plan. She leaned all the way into the contrast between Sue and's cheerful public persona and the barbed reality underneath it. And by the time filming wrapped, producer James L. Brooks had reportedly signaled that her future with the show wasn't closed. White returned the following season, then kept returning, eventually joining the main cast and appearing in dozens of episodes before the series ended. It's a rare case of a one-off antagonist becoming one of a show's defining ensemble players. When the Mary Tyler Moore Show wrapped its 7-season run in March 1977, the writers wanted the ending to sting. The premise: the entire WM newsroom is fired in a station shakeup, except for the one person least equipped to keep the job, anchor Ted Baxter. A group hug was scripted as the emotional climax, but what happened next reportedly came together on set. As the cast held the embrace, someone floated the idea of finding a funnier way out of it than simply breaking apart, and Georgia Engel, who played Ted's wife, Georgette, suggested they all shuffle sideways as one clumped toward a box of tissues sitting on a nearby desk. The bit stayed in the final cut, giving the finale's most emotional beat an unexpected, very human punchline. It's often cited as one of the most memorable series send-offs in sitcom history, closing on Mary alone in the newsroom, turning off the lights, and walking out the door for the last time. In a third-season episode, Mary's visiting mother casually reminds her father not to forget his pill, and both Mary and her father answer, "I won't." The line is deliberately ambiguous. It could be about a heart medication, or it could be a nod to the birth control pill, delivered so casually that a viewer could miss it entirely. Writer Trevor Silverman, who worked on the episode and was one of the show's key writers on matters of women's private lives, later spoke about how carefully the writers chose to place that moment with Mary rather than the more openly unconventional Rhoda. Mary was the trusted, responsible, all-American professional woman, and having the joke land through her gave the idea, in Silverman's words, a kind of stamp of approval that audiences in the early 1970s were more likely to accept. It's frequently cited by television historians as one of the earliest, if not the first, sitcom references to birth control, delivered so lightly that it slipped past most viewers and network censors alike. For the show's first season, Mary Tyler Moore wore what's known in hairstyling as a fall, a half wig attached at the back of the head to add length and volume, blended with her own natural bangs in front. It was Moore's own idea. Having spent 5 years as Laura Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show, she wanted Mary Richards to read as visually distinct from her most famous previous role, and changing her hairstyle was the simplest way to do it. The problem was that Moore reportedly found the piece uncomfortable to perform in, saying she could never fully relax or turn her head naturally while wearing it. Once audiences had accepted Mary Richards as her own character, rather than a Laura Petrie retread, the wig quietly disappeared. Season 2 opens with noticeably shorter, lighter-colored hair, and the show never acknowledges the change on screen, a small, unremarked continuity shift that most viewers at the time simply never registered. The WJM-TV newsroom is one of the most convincing fictional workplaces in sitcom history, and it was built on a modest soundstage footprint with a limited budget. Set designers relied on layered clutter, ringing phones, a teletype machine, overstuffed letter trays, a Rolodex, to suggest a functioning newsroom with a staff far larger than the handful of characters the cameras actually followed. A windowed wall implying a broadcast studio just out of frame, background movement choreographed to suggest unseen coworkers, and a rotating assignment board listing plausible local news stories all work together to sell the illusion of a real, ongoing operation. Even the station's call letters had an implied backstory, tied to a fictional owner named Wild Jack Monroe. None of it needed to be shown directly to the audience. It just needed to feel like it existed just outside the frame, and for 7 seasons it did. Songwriter Sonny Curtis, who had previously fronted Buddy Holly's band, The Crickets, and co-written the rock standard, I Fought the Law, wrote Love Is All Around quickly after receiving a brief description of the show's premise, reportedly finishing the core of the song in a matter of hours. But the lyrics as originally written hedge on whether Mary Richards is actually going to make it in Minneapolis. How will you make it on your own? This world is awfully big, girl. And even the closing line only promises she might just make it after all. After the first season proved Mary Richards was clearly thriving, not struggling, the show's producers asked Curtis to update the song to match. The rewritten lyrics dropped the uncertainty entirely. Who can turn the world on with her smile? You're going to make it after all. Turning a tentative theme about survival into a confident declaration. It's a small but telling piece of trivia. The show's most recognizable piece of music tracked the character's emotional arc closely enough that the network had it rewritten mid-run. The Mary Tyler Moore Show won 29 Primetime Emmy Awards across its 7 seasons, a record that stood for 25 years until Frasier, itself created by veterans of the same MTM television ecosystem, surpassed it with a 30th win in 2002. The show took home the award for Outstanding Comedy Series 3 years running, in 1975, 1976, and 1977, closing out its run at its commercial and critical peak, rather than fading out. Individually, Ed Asner won 3 Emmys for Lou Grant on this show alone, later adding 2 more for the spin-off drama Lou Grant, making him one of the most decorated performers in Emmy history. Valerie Harper won 3 consecutive Supporting Actress awards before adding a Lead Actress win on her own spin-off Rhoda. Cloris Leachman won twice as Phyllis, Ted Knight twice as Ted Baxter, and Betty White once for Sue and Nivens. Before this show, Half-hour comedy rarely competed for the kind of prestige recognition usually reserved for hour-long dramas. The Mary Tyler Moore Show helped change that perception permanently. The premiere episode of Season 3 has Mary discovering she's being paid $50 a week less than the man who held her job before her. Real money in 1972. When she confronts Lou Grant, he doesn't deny it or dress it up. The previous employee had a family to support, so he was paid more, even though Lou openly admits Mary's work is better. It's a startlingly direct depiction of workplace pay discrimination for a network sitcom of that era, and it didn't resolve with a clean win. Mary receives a raise, but only half of what she'd asked for. Feminist writer and activist Gloria Steinem is widely quoted as summing up the episode by noting that Mary agitated for equal pay and got about half of what she wanted, calling it a distinctly pop-cultural kind of compromise, reflecting how far real change still had to go even as television started to acknowledge the problem existed. Behind the camera, writer Trevor Silverman was part of a genuinely progressive writer's room for the era, one that pushed back on scripted dialogue that didn't ring true to how women actually spoke or behaved, feeding real workplace friction directly into the scripts. The most surprising connection on this list has nothing to do with Minneapolis and everything to do with Springfield. James L. Brooks co-created the Mary Tyler Moore Show with Alan Burns in 1970, and nearly 2 decades later, he was one of the key producers who helped develop Matt Groening's animated shorts into the full series that became The Simpsons, working alongside Sam Simon, another veteran of the Brooks-founded writers' room culture that included shows like Taxi. The connective tissue runs deeper than one producer's resume. Julie Kavner got an early break on Rhoda, the Mary Tyler Moore Show spinoff, playing Rhoda's younger sister Brenda. From there, she moved into the Brooks-produced Tracey Ullman Show, where she began voicing a character named Marge in a series of short animated sketches, the same Marge who anchored The Simpsons when it became its own series in 1989. Ed Asner and Valerie Harper both later turned up as guest voices in Springfield as well. It's not a direct creative blueprint from one show to the other, but it is a genuine through line. The same production culture that built a believable Minneapolis newsroom went on, a generation later, to build one of the most influential animated families in television history.